This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
It's Election Day on this Tuesday, November 8th. Jespersen here with Hicks. Thanks for making time for us on Real Talk. As we said in our tweet that goes out from our official account at Real Talk RJ, just 10 minutes before the show or whatever, we want to let you know what's coming up and what you can expect on every episode of Real Talk. We will let you know that it's Election Day, it's voting day in a couple of different contexts. Relatively speaking, locally, I mean, depending on where you're listening to us from, locally, we've got a by-election in the Alberta riding, the provincial riding of Brooks Medicine Hat, as Alberta's premier is going to endeavor to get herself a seat in the Alberta legislature. So Danielle Smith's got to win this by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat today. And she's going up against, as you know, we've been talking about it on the show, former Brooks Mayor Barry Morishita and the NDP candidate Gwendolyn Dirk. Now, there are a couple of other candidates running in the race. The fact of the matter is they're going to get trounced, and this is not the type of thing that a news anchor with a tie on sitting behind a $300,000 set would ever say. But we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the candidates that are going to get trounced. But there are a couple of others, the Wild Rose Independence Party and the Alberta, it's sort of like the Quit Canada Party, the No More Medicine Party, the We Don't Listen to Doctors Anymore Party, these types of parties, the fringe parties. There are some other candidates running, but it's a 3-horse race, really, and it's probably a 2-horse race, and it might actually be a 1-horse race, but we'll find out. We're going to see what happens with Danielle Smith, the premier. Here's the thing. She's probably going to win the by-election. She's probably going to win her way into the Alberta legislature. What good is a premier or a party leader without a seat? Not great. Optically, it's a tough look, right? But what if she just barely wins? I mean, if she loses, this is a huge story. This is a big deal, and it would be a big deal for Barry Morishita, who would probably be the one to beat her if he could. I think there's probably going to be some vote splitting going on. We've spent some time debating on this show whether or not it would make sense for the Alberta Party and the Alberta NDP to agree on some sort of a truce here. Maybe the NDP might say it might be good for democracy to have another voice in the legislature. Might be good or beneficial for the Alberta Party to have a seat in the Alberta legislature, especially its leader, Barry Morishita, a capable and experienced political leader, former mayor of Brooks, former president of the Alberta municipalities. You know the deal. But of course, that's not the way that politics works. If we were in the NDP back rooms right now with their senior strategist, they would be laughing. Did you hear that Jespersen was talking about how we should give the Alberta Party a foothold? They would be laughing. It would be the funniest. Not a chance. And that's why their candidate, Gwendolyn Dirk, has been campaigning. They've been knocking on doors in that riding. They've been sending down their MLAs, their elected members of the legislature, to try to get her a seat because the NDP knows that obviously, the next provincial election is going to be a 2-party race, and they want to make sure that they have an opportunity to send a big message. Winning Brooks Medicine Hat would send a huge message, but it's probably not going to happen. So we'll see what happens here. If Barry Morishita wins it for the Alberta Party, it says something about Danielle Smith, doesn't it? But the fact of the matter is she's probably going to win her way in. Not in the riding she wanted to. She would have liked that Livingston-McLeod riding. That's her home riding. But it was unavailable at the time. And still, the folks, the good people of the city center riding of Calgary Elbow are wondering, well, what about us? Still without representation and no movement on a by-election plan for the residents of Calgary Elbow. So that's what's going on in our neck of the woods in the province of Alberta. And tomorrow we'll talk about the results, assuming that they're in. My call is that Danielle Smith's going to win this one. You can let me know what yours is. But I'm intrigued to see what the numbers are. I'm intrigued to see what Barry Morishita's legacy, what his years of public service earn him, whether or not there's a loyalty from the electorate. And then the big story that people are going to be paying attention to around the world is obviously the 2022 midterm elections down in the United States. Now, if you listen to the pundits, they're talking about this as a potential red wave rising. Could this be a big one for the Republicans? There are some swing states at play. There are big implications for the balance of power. The Democrats are doing their best to cling to narrow majorities, and of course, all of this leading to the next presidential election. What are people going to be voting on? They're going to be voting on the economy. They're going to be voting on President Joe Biden's leadership and his plan for the future of the United States. Crime rates are up in a lot of the states that are going to be voting today. And on the Democratic side, they're hoping that the Supreme Court's recent ruling regarding Roe v. Wade will serve as a wake-up call to millions of American voters who might not otherwise be motivated. Johnny, you saw this video that I sent from TikTok, this account Roe v. Bros.
I did, yeah.
This is, I think it's entertaining, but also not at all. I think you're going to know what I mean. And the video makes its point quite clearly. It's being described on social media. You can find it on TikTok at Roe v. Bros. You can find it on Twitter from the account that posted it. It's Ann Secure, like insecure, but with Ann, with an E. Ann Secure. She said this might be the most effective election ad of all time.
Can you pee with a tampon in? I don't think it's recommended.
Welcome to another episode of Roe v. Bros, the game show where we find out how much men know about women's bodies. Can you pee with a tampon in?
I think you got to take it out. I've seen the little tampon trash cans in the bathrooms, so probably why.
Why are there different types of tampons?
Different sizes of vaginal cavities.
About how many tampons would one use for their period on average?
One or two? I think one, to be honest, one. And they put them inside.
Yes. What is a period?
What is a period? It's the time of the month where the woman is ovulating.
Can you pee with a tampon in?
No.
Okay, no. All right. Are you registered to vote?
Yes.
Are you registered to vote?
Yes.
Are you registered to vote?
Yes.
Don't let man brains outvote women in the upcoming election. Vote November 8th.
Pretty good stuff. And I think that there's probably a lot of guys listening right now going, I'm glad that I wasn't put on the spot, asked those questions. I don't know how well I would do on those.
I don't know, though. Most of it seems like standard,
But you're
sex
married.
ed.
You're married. Yeah,
I guess.
sex ed
Yeah.
and being around a
Yeah,
woman.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Here, what we should do is we'll keep doing this.
Single guys, are at a loss there.
Two dudes talking about the implications of the
I don't even
women's
want to.
issues
Can
in
we
the
not?
We don't have to.
Can we just
We
let
don't
the
have-
video speak for itself?
I think the
Yeah.
video spoke for itself
Thank you.
loud and clear. Yeah, but oh man, I thought that was a good one, but obviously not funny at all. And so we're going to see what happens. They're saying that the results on this could take weeks. There's a lot at stake. Obviously, there's going to be the advanced ballots. There's the mail-in ballots. There's people that are showing up today, and there's going to be some hotly contested races. And so this is something we're going to be checking in with our American neighbors on the show over the next number of days as we analyze what happens here. It's a big deal with big implications, obviously, and that's a story that we're going to continue to follow. We could not ignore, and I should mention, by the way, coming up in about 25 minutes here on the show, we're going to be talking to Geoff White, a longtime Canadian diplomat who's just published a book. Here's the thing that's really cool about working for Canada. This book is actually available for free. And I'm going to ask him, first of all, why do you publish a book that's available for free? I'm not saying he shouldn't. I just think it's unusual. I think it's super cool. And we'll have the link for you if you're listening to this later on the podcast or on YouTube, watching it after the fact. Just check out the show notes and we'll have it posted there. Geoff White's going to talk to us about populism, diplomacy, and a whole bunch of other things that he had an opportunity to understand in a very fulsome way through a multi-decades career working for his country, working for Canada in public service, and that's something we'll be talking about. Yesterday, our conversation with political scientist Dr. Duane Bratt lit a fire under a lot of you. For those unfamiliar with the story, there's a city councilor, a Ward 4 councilor down in Calgary that's facing new allegations from a woman who credibly claims to be the person that was subjected to a sexual assault back when she was just 16 years of age. At that time, Sean Chu, nearly 20 years her senior, and a Calgary police officer. This in the late 1990s. So what's changed about this story? Well, over the weekend, she, from her Twitter account, started sharing details, not just about the events in question that night and in subsequent nights back in the late 1990s, starting at the Husky House restaurant in Calgary. If you missed this, if you need the context, this is an explosive story. You can check out my interview, my conversation yesterday with Duane Bratt. That's the November 7th edition of Real Talk. You can find it in our YouTube or podcast archives. Well, obviously, the interview yesterday rattled some cages. And HH, the alias that this woman is using, HH, she reached out to the show. She's been in touch with us. And she wanted me to let you know that there are some things going on that demand our attention. She says there are a lot of sock puppet accounts. You know what this is? The fake Twitter accounts, the account that it's a real account, but it's not who it says it is. It's people behind the scenes pulling the strings, political operatives or otherwise, right? These are real people that are doing this. She says there are many sock puppet accounts that are publicly outing me. They're saying who she is. They're identifying her. She says many people, including myself, have been working all day. She sent me this at 7 o'clock this morning, says working to report them. She says none of the offending posts have been taken down. She says, meantime, my Twitter account has been shadow banned. All right, that means that it's been reported by people and Twitter has taken action. So it means that her account won't come up in search engines. Her tweets won't show up. The machine is working. She says, Ryan, please feel free to get the word out. Now, we won't tell you any more about her, but what we will do is remind you of the importance of taking a story like this and keeping it in the spotlight. This is about accountability. Remember, this is a sitting Calgary city councilor that's implicated in this. A years-long, nay, a decades-long story of abuse and harassment from a woman who was just 16 years old when she became involved with this as a minor. If you missed yesterday's episode, I wanted to share with you just a portion of what Duane Bratt shared with us. Keep in mind, he has the trust of this person. They've met in person. He's verified her identity. He has seen evidence that has since been shared with the public. And Duane Bratt painted a very clear picture to us yesterday of the toll that this has taken on HH.
The harassment is continuing, right? And so you get to a certain point where it's like, enough is enough. I need to go public. She has been going back and forth. You can imagine how traumatized she is, how scared she is for her own life, her children's life, her boyfriend's career. She's been forced to move. There's been vandalism to her car. So I think that's one reason. The other is that Sean Chu is back on council committees. They said, it's been a year, so let's bygones be bygones, and he's back on committees. And there's been a whole series of other scandals involving some of the same people that are all emerging around this time.
That was Dr. Duane Bratt on this show yesterday. Of note, Calgary City Councilor, all right, so Sean Chu's colleague on City Council, Giancarlo Cara, tweeted yesterday, if you didn't catch Duane Bratt on Jespersen today, he says, please plug into this blood-boiling story. He says you can listen to about 13-minute mark on the YouTube link, then go support HH's GoFundMe account as she stands bravely against her abuser and his enablers. You can see that tweet on my screen right now from his account at GC Cara. That's a city councilor talking about a blood-boiling story involving his colleague. I don't know how other councilors, I don't know how the mayor of Calgary continues to work with this guy, Sean Chu. Now, what's particularly interesting about this is there are a lot of connections. I mean, the political operatives here, the Venn diagram, the overlap of some of the other outrageous and shocking and troubling political stories we've been covering involving some of prominent conservative players, in particular in Alberta. A lot of the same names are surfacing here. So we'll keep digging on this. This is a story that we will continue to cover. You can count on that. And if this is reaching your ears and you do have involvement with this story, you can always reach out to us in confidence like HH did. You can hit us up, most notably on our email inbox to talk@ryanjespersen.com. You know, we have another show here. Our parent company, Relay, publishes a sports show called The Hedge every day. You can check it out at thehedgepod.com. Our technical producer, John Hicks, also works on that show. And I noticed yesterday you guys were talking about this Mitchell Miller fallout with the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, it's just horrible.
That is, I'm not going to spend too much time about this on this story because obviously Andrew Walker, the host of The Hedge, covered it, and people can download that. And the story has kind of moved on in a way. But for people that aren't familiar with it, this Mitchell Miller kid, he was a prospect with the Arizona Coyotes, right?
Yeah, good player. I mean, he was prospect to go, I think, 72nd in the NHL draft.
So he's way better than us.
He's not amazing, but
decent.
He's very good defenseman, very good right shot, and ended up getting pushed all the way down into I think 111th after all of this stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so facts had surfaced around his history as a young teen.
Yes.
Right around 14 years of age.
And then more came out, and then more. And
finally, the Arizona Coyotes were like, we're done with this guy. To sum it up,
and then
this
more
guy
came
basically, this guy basically, he's a bully. He's an asshole is what he is. And he had bullied a developmentally delayed young man, a classmate of his, right, who happened to be black, but it adds to the story, right? It actually, as a matter of fact, doesn't just add to the story. It's relevant because racial slurs were involved. And it had been discovered that this Mitchell Miller guy had basically been calling this kid the N-word and calling him brownie
more than that
for years.
Yes.
There was one incident, and I'm sure that this is not limited. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of incidents.
This is the one everyone knows about.
But to paint a picture, if you haven't heard about this yet, this guy, this Mitchell Miller guy, this prick, was like
and
wiping.
we can call him that. He's an adult.
Oh,
so,
dude.
Yeah.
I mean, like if the shoe fits. And so he was wiping chocolate bars on the inside of a urinal and then feeding them, giving them to this
candy,
this kid to eat. Right? The kid had to be tested for like STIs, HIV. Like it was, and obviously it's just horrific. And this was a years-long history of abuse.
And that was the one incident that everyone heard about that made the Arizona Coyotes look further and find other stuff. But there were apparently, first of all, this developmental child at the time, he basically is 4 years behind everyone else. So when they were 14, when this happened, he's operating at a 10-year-old level.
He's a kid.
So that's number one. Number two, it's racially motivated. Number three, it wasn't just, putting candy in a urinal with his friend and forcing him to eat it. And then he had to have subsequent HIV tests and hepatitis and all these things. This started in grade 1, and the incident we're talking about happened in grade 8. So there's 6, 7, 8 years
it's like a lifetime
of abuse that started with him throwing stuff at him on the bus to school, slapping him in the back of the head, continuing to verbally abuse him at school. And I was really proud of Andrew Walker yesterday because he's big on, he doesn't like cancel culture, but he was hands down in agreement that this person doesn't deserve the privilege of playing in the NHL. And I'll just say there was more stuff in between. There was an incident, the actual incident that I believe caused the Boston Bruins, the Arizona Coyotes, and then the Boston Bruins to rescind their contract was a videotape that surfaced of him slamming the kid's head into a wall.
Oh, gee, I didn't even hear about that one.
And
there's
the
always
parents
more, right?
of the kid refused to release the video because they didn't want to embarrass their son.
You're talking about the parents of the victim.
Yes.
Let's call him a survivor.
But just knowing that video's out there, this kid can never play in the NHL.
So we've kind of skipped a step in the story here, but this is kind of how people talk when they're having coffees or beers. And what made it's not that the kid got drafted, because I don't think that a lot of this information was out there.
Nobody's arguing his talent.
Not all of it.
Yeah.
And the Arizona Coyotes dropping him for obvious reasons, but the Boston Bruins signed the kid. Right? And here's where it got really interesting because, you have scenarios in professional sports where a team will see an opportunity to sign a player that has off-ice or off-field issues.
This happens a lot.
right? I mean, I'm not comparing the two.
No.
But you look at the Edmonton Oilers when they brought in Evander Kane, and there were some off-ice issues. There was a mess with his finances.
And I still have my feelings about
There
that.
was a
but
real
we're talking
controversy
about,
with his former partner, the mother of his child. They had a bitter custody
Other
dispute
women.
in court. There were a lot of things going on with Evander Kane. He especially, and I don't know if I would really be careful, but I say especially with women. But I think that across the broad spectrum, a lot of people had a real problem with Evander Kane. But the Edmonton Oilers thought, hey, listen, and I don't speak for the franchise, obviously, but there was an opportunity to bring in a high-scoring forward, a guy who had an opportunity who had a real desire to prove himself or to prove something, and so they bring him in at risk of bringing a cancer into the dressing room, and it appears as though it's working out okay.
Yes.
Kane is clicking with McDavid and Draisaitl, and he's a big part of the Oilers' offense, and there do not appear to have been distractions off the ice since he's come to Edmonton. This is completely different in the sense that this is someone where I think that there's, like Walker yesterday invoked a couple of words. I invite people to check out the Hedge podcast at thehedgepod.com. You can download it. Walker used 2 words that I thought were really important. Number 1, he described this kid as evil. And I think that the shoe fits. Number 2, he described what he had done as torture. And I think that fits as well. So the Boston Bruins signed this kid. I have no idea why.
Well,
assuming that they're going to fill a hole that the team needs filled.
Here's the thing. I think what happened is the parents probably let them know after they signed him about the video. And that's where and this is what makes organizations like this. I mean, Cam Neely, the guys who are running the Boston Bruins, they're taking it from the fans. They're taking it from literally the players did not want this kid on the team. Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, who's an asshole in his own right, was like, no way.
Marchand's an asshole on the ice.
But I'm just saying, everyone said no. They signed him anyways. And I don't know for sure, but my thinking is the parents probably said, well, hey, we have this video. We don't want to release it to embarrass our son, but,
I was just...
And again, I don't know that happened, but if I was in the Boston Bruins organization and I knew that video was out there, there's no way I would sign that.
Yeah, so they did. They did sign him. And I noticed here somebody on our live chat, by the way, saying Jake Virtanen's another one. Corey, that's Corey on our live chat. Corey, that's actually a better example, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I mean, Jake Virtanen is, people that don't know the backstory there, just Google him, and you'll find it all. I mean, he's been accused of sexual assault, of rape, while he was with the Vancouver Canucks organization, and he his defense was atrocious. I mean, there was a quote out of the hearing where in the cross-examination, his lawyers say to this survivor, they basically say, why? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said, why didn't you fight him off? And she said, I mean, the line that she said is heartbreaking and landed like a bomb. She said, I figured that saying no would be enough. I mean, Jake Virtanen has been ostracized, right? Yeah. He went over to the KHL. He sucked there. Not just that, but to sound tacky for a second, he's also a lousy hockey player. so there were 2 reasons.
And I don't mean to laugh.
When the Oilers brought in Jake Virtanen, a lot of people were saying, number 1, it's abhorrent. And Corey, I appreciate you reminding me of this. They said, number 1, it's abhorrent because of what he's accused of. And yes, there's innocent until proven guilty, this, that, and the other. But the Virtanen case, there are some very unique details. You can find them yourselves on Google that would lead you to believe it's a bad idea to bring him in. But people also said from a scouting standpoint, it was a bad idea because he's a bad hockey player.
100%.
So what is an organization like the Edmonton Oilers with Virtanen or like the Boston Bruins with this kid, what are they willing to risk reputationally? What are they willing to risk with their fan base? What is the message that they're risking sending to their fans, to their young fans, when they bring someone like this in?
It's horrible. But when you're talking about Kane and Virtanen, and I'm not washing over what they did or were accused of, these guys weren't convicted. This kid was convicted, did not apologize, was not remorseful. The magistrate in the case even wrote in his notes that the other kid involved in this, horrible torture was crying, was remorseful, apologized to the family. Mitchell didn't do any of that. He wrote a letter to all the hockey teams apologizing first.
Right. In other words, please sign me.
And the magistrate literally wrote that he believes he doesn't have any remorse other than that he's afraid for his future.
So what was remarkable about that? I mean, there's a lot of remarkable elements to this story. Number 1, that, like you said, Johnny, Bruins leadership, like when you talk about Patrice Bergeron is going to the Hockey Hall of Fame. Patrice Bergeron will have his number retired by the Boston Bruins. He's a Canadian gold medalist. He's a Stanley Cup champion. He's a World Junior gold medalist. Patrice Bergeron is top shelf class of the league. And he basically said, this kid doesn't fit the culture of our dressing room. When do you ever hear a pro athlete, in particular in the compliant culture of hockey, right? Like, hockey players rarely speak out against coaches and management. It's not like the NBA. It's not like the NFL, where the players say what they think. There's not a lot of loyalty or affiliation to teams. There's a lot of player movement. Hockey's different that way. So for them to say, for the players to say, we don't know what management's thinking on this one, he's not welcome in our room, he doesn't fit the culture of our room, that's amazing. How about this yesterday from Ty Anderson reporting on Twitter? You can follow him at _ Ty Anderson. Says the Bruins weight room, as the Bruins released this Mitchell Mill kid, the Bruins weight room is currently playing the song Karma Police by Radiohead. How great is that? Number two, the commissioner of the National Hockey League,
cut the head off the dragon,
the most powerful person in hockey,
hated by everyone,
which means he's doing his job.
Did something good for once.
Gary Bettman did something good and said, this kid's not welcome to play in the National Hockey League. He said, and again, paraphrasing, I don't have the quote in front of me, but Gary Bettman basically said, I would have thought that the Boston Bruins would have contacted us before signing him.
Ridiculous.
They didn't. He said he won't play in the NHL. And this is a big step. Hockey's culture has taken a beating.
That's what I was going to say. Like, with everything that's happened with Hockey Canada, with Virtanen, with the Chicago Blackhawks.
Oh, man.
I welcome all of this. Like, we should have these things in place. We should have players speaking whether they want to bring troublesome players into dressing rooms. We should listen to victims. We should hear the whole story. And Gary Bettman telling a kid he can't play in the NHL, I've seen all over Twitter people saying, how can he do that? Well, a boss of any company can refuse to hire anyone.
100%.
Playing in the NHL is one of the greatest privileges in the world. It is not a right by any means.
And what message would that send to kids that survive bullying? I mean, this is a hate campaign. I mean, it feels like bullying is almost an insufficient word, right? It's abuse, like Andrew Walker called it, torture.
He keeps referring to it in his letters. I made a mistake, 4 years ago. You didn't make a mistake. For years, you tortured someone. You didn't make it. Like, we all do stupid shit when we're younger, Ryan.
Sure.
I've
done tons of it.
We've all done things that are mean, some of us. We've all done things we regret. But a lot of us haven't continued doing it for years on end. It takes someone, like, honestly, and I don't want to say this to, like, I'm not forgiving him or anything like that, but he needs help. He needs real help. He needs therapy for years.
Yeah.
Why did you do this? Was it the parenting? I mean, his dad on Twitter is a whole other, go down that rabbit hole. I mean,
do we want to?
It's a lot of MAGA. It's a lot of posts about conspiracies, and it's so...
Yeah, I mean, Plain Power is watching
I'm not going to
live.
argue on whether parenting played a role, but...
Well, on our live chat right now, an audience member, Plain Power, wonders, so is it nature or nurture? I mean, that's a really interesting question. I don't know if we're in a position to open the lid off that one. I don't know. His parents, obviously, I'm not sure.
His father's retweeting, like, support Mitchell tweets.
Well, I
and
mean,
things like
I
that.
guess you probably are going to you're going to try to do what you can to jump. I mean, geez, this is kind of a weird. Let me just take an off ramp for a second, and I recognize that it's kind of like fiction based on reality, but I mean, you watch the Dahmer miniseries on Netflix, and like his dad still goes to the wall for him. I mean, you
love your kid,
the most notorious serial killer in global history. Well, I don't know if I want to say that definitively, but one of the most horrific people to ever walk the face of the earth, and the parents are still going to back their kid because you love your kid. But, and I'm not calling this kid Jeffrey Dahmer, but at the same time, I don't really put much credence into what a parent says about their child. My parents would unconditionally love me. Your mom will unconditionally love you no matter what. I mean, there's gonna be that sort of moment where a parent goes, I will go to the wall for my kid. At the same time, let me say, like, if you're in elementary school using the N-word as you beat up on and torture
for years,
a kid for years, you learned it somewhere.
Had to get a whiff of it.
You saw it somewhere.
Yeah.
The parents had to get a whiff of it somewhere.
If you go look at his dad, and I'm not telling anyone to go, abuse this guy on social media. He's clearly out there and hasn't blocked anyone, doesn't have a private setting, but you look at his follows, Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, Candace Owen. And again, everyone's allowed to have their own opinion, but you start to form this idea in your head of maybe he wasn't given the right kind of discipline to say, hey, man, you seem a little angry, or why on earth did you do this to this child? Do we need to take you to therapy?
Yeah,
do
unless the parents think it's funny, unless the parents think it's acceptable, unless he sees bullying at home, right? I mean, Kathy says a mistake is something that happens once.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a mistake. You don't make, and I'll say this, you don't make a mistake for like 9 years. I mean, you can. You can. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that will look back on their life and say that decade was a mistake.
Yeah,
but that's not what we're talking about.
Drug abuse, alcoholism.
A mistake is like,
but hurting other people, like
in a moment of anger, I said something stupid once, and I want to profusely apologize for it. Or in a moment of indiscretion, I made this mistake with our finances, or I did something here, or my behavior lacked in this context. It was a mistake, and I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You don't say I made a mistake. I mean, this is a conscious effort. This kid woke up every single day. I mean, you put yourselves in the shoes of the kid
how
that
school
survived
is,
this. Can you imagine the pit in this survivor's stomach every single day for a decade as he tried to go to school? And can you imagine if he saw this Mitchell right now flying private, right? Signing, we all know like the minimum salary, in the National Hockey League,
million,
just under $1 million a year. Like, can you imagine staying in the finest hotels, enjoying features? The Hockey Night in Canada, they'll show him walking into the rink in his $2,000 suit, $600 shoes, right? I mean, can you imagine if that was your traumatizer? If that was your bully and you saw that, what message does that send?
And
Duane right now says, Duane says, signing this guy ruins the entire reputation of the team.
100%. It's not about revenge either. It's just about being fair.
It's about accountability.
It's about justice, responsibility, and I say that as someone who's made mistakes, and
we all have.
We all need to do work to better ourselves. But the other thing people saying on Twitter, they're saying, well, he served his time, which was community service, and he supports Little Miracles and these charities, and he's going to this therapy, and he's part of this group. But they were all recommended and ordered by the court. He hasn't done anything outside of what the judge, the magistrate, whoever has asked him to do. He hasn't gone and... What's the first thing you do when you're trying to make amends for doing something wrong? You go right to the victim and you sit down with them and you say, I want to listen to you.
100%.
He hasn't done that once. And he's had years to do it. So, yeah, it's just... I think
we're
Andrew
laughing
was
now.
right.
It's not funny. We're laughing, but I'm like, you don't get credit for community service if it's court ordered.
That shouldn't even
community
be
service.
on there.
That's not like look what I did for the community. It's ordered by the court.
Yeah. It's...
hey, I went and spent 14 years in prison. Hey, you were sentenced.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about this for 90 seconds just to touch on it and get
it's important,
but
though,
it is
because
important.
It is changing hockey culture, like you said. It is turning things around, hopefully for the better, because they need to be. And I think players, and hopefully now owners, executives, if they don't get it now that they should be doing. I mean, when you sign a player, especially for $2.8 million for 3 years, you do your homework. But this looks so bad for the Boston Bruins that they had to wait till the last second. They had to have evil Gary Bettman come in and say, "Don't do this." Like it's
well, because
really
Gary Bettman's got to protect the brand, the National Hockey League brand.
He's a
Like
lawyer.
the Boston Bruins, one of the original six. I think most people know this. Obviously, the value. I don't know what the franchise value. We can search this live, but franchise value Boston Bruins. It's over $1 billion for sure. So yeah, $1.3 billion. That's the latest ranking by Forbes of the most valuable. What did they say? The most valuable team, the New York Rangers. Boston Bruins are right up there. $1.3 billion. So they've got to protect the value of that brand. But Don Sweeney, the general manager of the Bruins, can you imagine he gets a call from Gary Bettman, whose job it is to protect the brand, the shield of the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. And they've got their issues. They've got their problems, like you talked about. I mean, look at these original six franchises, right? The Chicago Blackhawks, the Boston Bruins. You look at what's happening with Hockey Canada. These are. I mean, Hockey Canada, geez, we spent a lot of time on the show talking about that. There's a big mess here, and this type of stuff doesn't help it at all.
No. And I think everyone's a little scared. Well, listen, we know which people are scared, but people are scared of the world we're living in. But you just have to be responsible for your actions these days. Yeah, maybe you won't get a job. Maybe you have to do a little more work. Maybe you have to change a little more. But I'd rather live in that world than a world where people can just hide. Like, imagine if there was no video of this kid smashing this other kid's head in the wall. Imagine if the kid just held it in and didn't go to the principal and didn't tell him he put a candy in a urinal and put it in my mouth. This guy would be in the NHL. Can you imagine, like, this coming out after he'd been playing for 4 or 5 years? Like, this is how we should do it. We need to cut it off the dragon's head before people enter privileged positions. This isn't like he's not becoming a mailman or
huge privilege.
Not looking down on mailman or any kind of job, but this is.
I get what you're saying.
Like you said,
it's not. This isn't like a $65,000-$70,000 a year with a good pension gig.
This is life-setting.
This is life-setting, multi-million-dollar, top-shelf, flying private, penthouse hotels, driving Lambos, like the top. I like this. A person watching live is it Ackhet, I think is the handle, says, I think it is nurture in the conversation, nature versus nurture, not just the parents, but society. And this is a great comment. Young men in particular who are talented athletes are coddled from a young age, and they're allowed to think that they can get away with anything. And I think that that's an astute comment. Hey, this conversation's gone way longer than we thought, but hey, that is the whole point. It's the whole purpose of the show. And I love that it lit a fire under you, John, and
Jeffrey's here
and
waiting
me as well. Okay, yeah, we got our author coming up, and I've still got a lot of ground to cover here.
Yeah.
So, but Real Talkers, we know you're showing up for these conversations. We've also got an email that's just arrived in real time from Calum, who wants to talk about the Brooks Medicine Hat by-election. I love that. To talk at ryanjespersen.com. Calum, I'm going to get your email in before the end of the show. I'll give you my word on that. John, if I start to rap and I haven't read Calum's email yet, you let me know.
Calum's email, writing it down.
Don't give me the exit music. Don't give me the exit tune, all right?
Two guys with ADHD trying to...
Yeah, perfect. We haven't even talked about Sarah Fisher, the new director of comms for the Conservative Party of Canada. They made a big hire yesterday. And it's a I say it's a controversial one. I saw some pretty prominent conservative commentators like Shanna Schaldhauser. If you know her, she said yesterday, hiring Sarah Fisher as DComs is a choice. That was her editorializing of it. Why? Because she aligned herself very strongly with the truck convoy. Actually, do you mind calling me up this video? We haven't even taken a commercial break yet. How about this? This is the type of real talk you want to show up for when John and I get a fire lit under us. We're going to talk about the stuff that matters. I can't tell you how liberating it is to not be on a terrestrial radio station. They'd be banging on the windows right now telling us to go to break. Hell no, we won't go, because I want to show you this video. This is Make Up Your Mind for Yourself. Make up your mind for yourself. This is who Pierre Poilievre and his team have just hired. This is the director of communications. She'll be plotting and setting the course for comms for the federal Conservative Party. Here she is talking about the convoy.
Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday morning. I woke up to the sound of truck horns honking. I don't know what's happening there. There was a 10-day injunction forcing them to, or I guess threatening that if they did honk their horns, there would be fines handed out. So I don't know if they're just accepting those fines or what, but it's nice to hear.
The honking of horns.
It's nice to hear.
It's nice to hear.
It's the worst sound.
It's nice to hear. You suspect that those horns weren't anywhere close to where she was living, but it's furthering. I mean, you want to talk about brand association. You want to talk about brand vulnerability. Their brand, the CPC, you're going to hear people talking about the Convoy Party of Canada, and this move, hiring her as DComs, I don't know if that's a step in the right direction. I don't think it is. You can let me know what you think to talk at ryanjespersen.com. These conversations happen because of amazing sponsors like our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. Of course, they present Positive Reflections on the show every Monday. A reason to fill our bucket, to focus on the positives. Here's a positive. I saw new research, John. There's this misconception that solar panels really dive in productivity or efficiency when snow falls on them.
Freezing.
New numbers are out. It shows that the newest brands of solar panels lose 3% efficiency with snow on top. How cool is that? If you have questions about what solar could look like in your application, residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, you can get in touch with Kubi today at kubienergy.ca. Get your free quote. And don't forget, a lot of times, for an install to happen first thing in spring, they've got to get the design done through the winter months. So it's always a great time to check out Kubi Energy. At Freeland Brothers, 16 different Alberta locations. They've been in business, family-owned since 1955. We want to let you know that coming up tomorrow at their Edmonton store, Dr. Parody will be there to talk about mood and mental health. At a grocery store? Yeah, that's right. It's all part of, isn't that great? It's part of their Healthy Insights initiative. They have monthly events that are going on through the fall and winter seasons, easy and actionable things to do to feel energetic and motivated. It's $25 per person, includes a glass of wine or kombucha. They've got charcuterie there, and then 15% off the Freeland Brothers Healthy Choice and Health and Beauty departments. You can book online ahead of time at freezen.com. Our friends at Local Environmental Services are gearing up for Friday's Trash Talk. It's one of their favorite moments of the week and one of ours as well, as we wrap up our show, giving you a platform to get whatever you need off your chest. You can email us your trash talk today. Local Environmental Services is about more than just garbage. Yeah, they handle garbage and recycling and landfill services, but they're about better service, better prices. It's what you get in Alberta and Saskatchewan when you align with this family-owned business. You can request a quote or learn more about their leadership team today by visiting localenvironmental.ca. And if you're a professional engineer in Canada and you're looking for a change of pace, you're looking to make a move, you know that feeling, you can't quite put your finger on it. You're paying your bills at your current job, but you just don't feel motivated, you don't feel fulfilled. You want to give people their time back? Why not look to the team at Apex Automation? At apexautomation.ca, they're always hiring. You can check out the careers link on their website, learn more about the projects in engineering, fabrication, automation. They serve upstream oil extraction facilities, pipelines, natural gas processing, chemical manufacturing in Edmonton, Saskatoon, and Vancouver, potash mining, robotics, brewing. I always want to mention brewing, automation there. Lots of opportunity for the PNG in your life at apexautomation.ca. We're going to get back to this by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat, and I'm scanning as I'm talking Calum's email, and I'm looking forward to that. You can be in touch with the show anytime. Plus, we want to bring you a comment, as, of course, our American neighbors, our southern neighbors are going to the polls today in a lot of the states. Some of them swing states. This 2022 midterm election, the stakes are huge. Nancy Pelosi speaking with Anderson Cooper yesterday in an interview you're going to want to hear. She goes on the record talking about that attack, a near-fatal attack that landed her husband, Paul, into the hospital in ICU. John, you want to tee up this clip right now? I mean, I think that this just paints a picture of what this midterm election is all about. You've got the Republicans and Democrats obviously fighting for control of the House and the Senate, and it's tight. It's tight. And gone are all talks of bipartisanship. Right? I mean, it's them versus us. It's red versus blue. It's been that way for a while. I mean, just look at January 6th. Look at the critics and then look at the apologists, right? And so Nancy Pelosi, just a short time removed from this attack, a home invasion where her husband was nearly killed with a hammer. And then Donald Trump's kid, Donald Trump Jr., joked about it, his Paul Pelosi Halloween costume, and people have been joking about it. Elon Musk sharing conspiracy theories about it, questioning the validity of the details around it. Anderson Cooper with CNN got an interview, an exclusive with Nancy Pelosi last night, and here's a portion of what she had to say.
Former President of the United States, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, others have spread stories casting doubt on what happened, fomenting conspiracy theories. What do you have to say to them?
It's really sad for the country. It's really sad for the country that people of that high visibility would separate themselves from the facts and the truth in such a blatant way. It's really sad, and it is traumatizing to those affected by it. They don't care about that, obviously, but it's destructive to the unity that we want to have in our country. But I don't have anything to say to them. I mean, we have nothing. There would be no common ground to have any conversation with them.
Is there enough?
There is no common ground. It says I would have nothing to say to them in this conversation. I mean, it kind of paints a picture of the significance of the divide, doesn't it? It kind of paints a picture with regards to what's at stake here with these midterm elections and what the difference in perspective is between Democrat and Republican leadership. We'll see what happens here with the results, and we'll continue to follow this story, bringing you the moments and the commentary that we believe to be most significant and most relevant to us as Canadians. Let's turn our attention back home, so to speak. Geoff White was an officer of Global Affairs Canada for nearly 30 years, from 1990 through to 2018, a career expert in Canadian foreign policy. He's just written a book, Working for Canada, a pilgrimage in foreign affairs from the New World Order to the rise of populism. In somewhat of an interesting scenario, he's made the book available for free for people who want to read it, which is really neat. Geoff White, kind enough to join us this morning live on the show. Good morning to you, and thanks for checking in with us.
Good morning, Ryan. It's pleased to be. I'm very happy to be here.
Let me throw you one out of the gates here that I don't know if you're expecting or not. Your book doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with this, but it's a big day. The 2022 midterm elections down in the United States. I would imagine yourself as a career diplomat, someone who's been involved in the public service and foreign diplomacy for a lot of years, it's something that you're paying keen attention to. What are some of the key things you're looking for, or where's your head at this morning as millions of Americans go to the polls?
Well, one of the things my book is about, actually, is this arc of history that began with the beginning of what was called the New World Order back in 1990, and a period of time when we thought that liberal internationalism was going to be the prevailing mode of activity on the international stage for many, many years. And it was for most of my career. But as my career came to a close in around 2018, we then had this new arrival of populism, of populist politics, with the election of Donald Trump, with what happened with Brexit, and a real, I would say, deterioration of the international scene and the notion that countries could work together cooperatively to bring about more open markets, freer trade, and greater democracy. And what's happening now in the States is just a further manifestation of that growing wave of populism, which is really based on a very high level of suspicion and, dare I say, ignorance. And it is disconcerting to see what is happening now. And one would hope that perhaps the midterm elections don't turn out quite as we might expect them to.
Yeah, people are talking about this red wave that they're expecting. Which I suppose would I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but would be an indictment on President Biden's leadership. And would also, I think, indicate, and again, at risk of oversimplification, would indicate that the average American voter, or at least enough of them, weren't concerned whatsoever with regards to the Roe v. Wade decision with the Supreme Court.
Yes, it's unfortunate. I'm not really in a position to comment on the Roe versus Wade decision, but what this means for Canadian international relations and our relations with the United States is very, very important. And we've seen how, since the arrival, when Trump became president, how Canada's particular trade interests and investment interests were very much threatened by the positions that he took. And it took some time and some very, very serious negotiating on the part of our, who is now our finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, who was then our foreign affairs minister, to renegotiate the free trade agreement that we had with the United States. And we came out of that, I must say, relatively unscathed. But it was a very, very difficult negotiation. And but the prime elements of the NAFTA were in fact preserved.
You obviously, I mean, starting with the Operation Desert Storm, I guess. I mean, that's the American reference to it. But the 1991 war in the Persian Gulf. I mean, you were involved in communications and negotiations and international trade and diplomacy for a number of decades. And of course, that would have been under different American administrations, to state the obvious, right? You would have had Republican presidents that the Canadian Foreign Service would have been dealing with. Diplomats would have been people would have been negotiating with, members of the Canadian Public Service. Obviously, you would have had Democratic presidents under Obama and, of course, under Bill Clinton as well. You saw different administrations with different priorities, and throughout, your job and the job of your colleagues would have been to maintain Canada's best interests. I'll never forget an interview with Justin Trudeau. This was before Trump was elected. This was back in 2015. I interviewed him on a terrestrial radio station, and I asked him to comment on the rapid rise of Trump's popularity. And jokingly, I asked him what his plan would be to work with an American president that had been a bombastic reality TV show like Donald Trump. And I'll never forget how quickly he worked to dodge the question. And it hit me almost immediately that he didn't want to go on the record, even on a local radio station, as poking fun at or criticizing who ultimately could become and did become the American president. He had to be careful even at that point. Had you seen anything under different presidents and different administrations anywhere remotely close to Trump? I mean, I guess what I'm asking you is how dramatically different was that 4 years?
Very, very dramatically different, because with all the presidents who were in power during my career at Global Affairs, there was always a president who the Canadian government could more or less work with. I mean, it was the senior Bush who was in charge when I joined Foreign Affairs, and then Clinton, and then later, of course, George W. Bush. And throughout that time, there was a consistency in American policy, which was in favor of open markets, in favor of free trade, against protectionism, in favor of a kind of liberal internationalism, which encouraged the development of democracy worldwide. But all of that came to a screeching halt with the election of Donald Trump. And of course, you make your reference to the interview with Justin Trudeau. And indeed, he had to be extremely careful, knowing that this man would be in charge and we'd have to be able to deal with him in some way. And as I say, the first challenge in that regard was the renegotiation of the NAFTA. And it is something that I think not just because of the leadership of Chrystia Freeland at the time, but because of a very, very strong team of Canadian negotiators within Global Affairs Canada, we were able to extract from that an acceptable, a more than acceptable compromise. And I have to say that Canada is well known for its ability to operate in the area of international trade in terms of negotiations and in terms of negotiating major agreements with respect to trade worldwide.
What do you think that is, Geoff? Because if you listen to some of the critics or listen to some of the pundits, there's the suggestion that Canada's losing its foothold a little bit, that Canada doesn't sort of walk with the same swagger on the international stage that it used to. Do you buy that? I mean, did you see that at the tail end of your career?
I don't buy that. I think that we have at Global Affairs, or we had at Global Affairs while I was there, a very strong team of people who can work very, very effectively internationally. We have been put into very difficult circumstances now because of Russia and Putin, and especially because of the situation in China and the very delicate path we have to walk with respect to trying to defend our own interests with respect to human rights, but also to look at what the trade relationship and the investment relationship with China must be in the future. And that's something which still has to be worked out. And perhaps because of this transitional period that we're in, it doesn't seem that Canada is quite as clear in its international relations as it once was. But I think that that will be worked out with time, because we do have the skills and the ability to do that.
You write about, and again, we're talking to author Geoff White, a longtime Canadian diplomat. You can check out the show notes, the episode notes here on the podcast or on YouTube if you want the link to check out his book, Working for Canada. I mean, you did a ton. I mean, what a career. The humanitarian intervention in Kosovo, softwood lumber. You were working on negotiating aviation agreements with foreign governments. I mean, a lot of work aimed at restoring and protecting human rights. Of course, people want to hear your stories. You were involved in a lot of things that the average person wouldn't be. What was one of the most memorable or one of those wild experiences that you had working for Canada abroad?
Oh, like one of the most interesting ones I had, I think, was when I was in South Africa, and we were responsible for relationships with Madagascar. And when I was in Madagascar, the Alberta company based in Fort Saskatchewan, Sherritt, had made the largest single investment in that country that had ever been made, about $7.6 billion in a nickel and cobalt mine. And just before it was to go into production, the government said that it was going to pull its license away. So it was imperiling the very existence of that operation, in a very important operation in Madagascar. And I had the privilege to be able to go to Madagascar and to meet with the president, who had been installed by a military dictatorship, to try to appeal with my Japanese and Korean colleagues, who were also involved in the shared investment, to try to get him to give the license that he was supposed to give to Sherritt so they could start operations. So that was a very interesting negotiation on my part, and I think it was instrumental, actually, because of the importance of this investment and the importance of the financing of it from the European Union, that we actually not only were able to get the license for operating, but we're also able to force the country, the regime, back into a democratic system in order to maintain its international reputation. So it was a win-win-win on all fronts, and it was one of the most exciting things that I did while I was with Global Affairs.
And it's wild, right? I mean, to state the obvious, Geoff, like it's the type of thing where the average Canadian would not know that story. They wouldn't have been aware of what Canadians were doing to negotiate over there. They wouldn't be aware of what was at stake. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar project. I mean, obviously you cite that as one of the more significant memories through the course of your decades-long career, but a lot of times the things that are being negotiated internationally have such a huge impact here on home soil, but the average Canadian doesn't even realize it's happening.
Well, that's true, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. And I wrote the book not to exalt my own role at Foreign Affairs, but so that people could get some kind of insight as to what Canadian diplomats do, what Canadian diplomats do here at headquarters, and what Canadian diplomats do abroad. And there are scores of other diplomats like me who could tell their own stories, but I have told mine in this book, and I hope that will give people some kind of insight into what we do as diplomats.
You talk, I mean, I want to reference again the title of the book, right? Working for Canada, a pilgrimage in foreign affairs from the New World Order to the rise of populism. I want to talk about that because that's one of I'm going to ask you about two phrases and two trends and two realities before this interview ends. I want to talk to you about populism, and I want to talk to you about globalism because we've got some critics that that throw that out as like a globalist prime minister or a globalist premier. I saw that the far right criticizing Jason Kenney on his way out the door, calling him a globalist premier, which I thought was kind of funny. But I mean, globalism is a reality, and it's oftentimes how things work. Before we talk about that, I want to talk to you about the rise of populism, where you saw it, where you see it, and what you think the significance is.
Well, I mean, the rise of populism in the United States with Donald Trump had the most significant impact on our relations, as I've already talked about. The fact that it's also happened in Britain with Brexit has led to, I think, a real deterioration in the economic circumstances of the UK. I also witnessed its growth while I was in Latin America. I was working in Chile, which is a very strong, very democratic country, but neighbors of Chile, Argentina, and Brazil were very much affected by the wave of populism, especially with Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. It's a very unfortunate phenomenon. It's unfortunate that I think it's based to a large degree on a turning away, not wanting to see the realities of the world. Rather than with, as we had with liberal internationalism or globalization, an understanding of how the world works and how we have to work together, pull together to make sure that we build stronger economies and a safer and more peaceful place to live.
Yeah, people are going to see a familiar storyline here. You referenced Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, who, of course, just lost the election, and as The Guardian is reporting here, describing it as stolen, right? Bolsonaro supporters refusing to accept the election result. What did Bolsonaro's defeat? We don't have to get too deeply into Brazilian politics, but what did his defeat? What did the woes experienced by Boris Johnson and a lot of the retrospect around Brexit and some of the instability in the UK? We'll see what this new prime minister has in store for that part of Western Europe. But what does that say to you about populism, and what does that say to you about where political trends are going? Do you see that as a step back? Do you see it as an indictment on the trend?
I see what happened in Brazil as being a hopeful change. It is starting to push back against that kind of politics, but it's certainly not going away, and it's certainly very deeply rooted. And it will take some time, I think, to start to get people to look at the world as it really is, rather than how they imagine it to be. It's important that we establish these stronger international conventions between countries, and we have a better understanding of how we can work together, rather than relying on prejudices and relying on some hateful views to continue to block our way forward.
Let me ask you about, I'm curious to know, I guess the ultimate question I want to get at is, what does the future look like for Canada in the context of diplomacy and in the context of Canada's future on the international stage? I love this comment from Aaron, who's watching us live on YouTube, says this insider view is so fascinating. Canadians have no clue how diplomacy works and seem to think that, common sense will just solve everything. Obviously, international cooperation, international negotiation is key. I think I don't want to sort of dumb this down to the point where we're explaining how government functions and how economies work. But there is some criticism or some sensitivity, in particular from the far right. I'm talking about, no one says it more than Theoren Fleury, the former hockey player, but his criticism around globalism and all the critics around globalism, criticizing governments for cooperation during COVID, for vaccine sharing, for things like that. But there are obviously huge economic implications as well. I'd be curious for your take on what Canada's future looks like in this context.
Well, when I think at the beginning of what was described by George, the first George Bush as the New World Order, and I think that the prevailing international consensus at that time, that free markets and private enterprise and greater pursuit of human rights worldwide, those were the things that would put the world in the right direction. I still think ultimately that is the right approach to international affairs. We saw towards the end of that period that people were questioning whether these trade agreements and more open markets were affecting badly some people within certain economies. And there was an appreciation towards that in that time, that we had to perhaps do some things which would mitigate against the effects of open markets and understand how certain communities could be protected within that situation, and what would be called a progressive trade agenda. So I think that's still the right direction to go, and I think that is what the government of Canada, as expressed by Chrystia Freeland, has been doing in trying to maintain good relations with countries who still have that particular kind of attitude. And Germany is certainly one of those countries. Japan is another of those countries. Australia also. So to work to maintain the alliances and the people who still have this perspective, to try to strengthen it and to try to get it going again.
This is a great comment from Heidi watching us live. Says, every time somebody disses the bureaucracy, I remind them that they're maybe the smartest people alive without credit. She says, name one deputy minister, like the people that actually run the show. And most people can't. One of the interesting things about deputy ministers is many times they're working under different, we don't really call them administrations in Canada, but different governments, different partisan different parties, right? There are a lot of members of the public service that have worked under, federally speaking, Liberals and Conservatives here in our home province of Alberta under the NDP or the Progressive Conservative or the United Conservative government. That's how they go, steady Eddie. The majority of this work, the majority of your work, Geoff, was do I use the word invisible? Right? It sort of flew under the radar.
Behind the scenes, absolutely. And that, that work does have to go on behind the scenes and is always going on behind the scenes at all times. In terms of, you talk about naming deputy ministers. Well, the deputy minister of global affairs now is David Morrison. And David Morrison is someone who hails from Alberta, actually. He hasn't lived here for some time, although he continues to have a resort or recreational home in southern Alberta. So, there are many Albertans actually who work within Global Affairs Canada and do have a perspective that keeps the interests of not just Canada, but Alberta in mind.
Tracy says free market economies and socially democratic governments try to help others, but I fear, says Tracy, that we're years, if not months away from seeing more nationalist policies. Can you see that? I mean, that plays well politically in some contexts, in some circumstances. Do you see more of a trend there?
Well, it's true, and I've seen that in the last couple of years, and I haven't been involved in the federal bureaucracy for about 4 years now. But when you see what Francois-Philippe Champagne is doing in terms of encouraging industrial growth in certain sectors, there is a bit of an industrial strategy happening now that would not have happened in the past, which is to a degree somewhat defensive because of the closing off of some international opportunities. So it's definitely something to watch, and we will be working in a different, certainly in a different era as we go forward.
Yeah, I heard an interview with it's not exactly a hard-hitting political podcast, but it's one of my favorites. The podcast Smartless, and they interviewed POTUS. Joe Biden was on there just a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about his job. He said, people sort of have thrown in the towel with America as a manufacturing giant. He says, I refuse to do it. And he talked about the jobs that they're creating, and he believes that they can take jobs back from China, and that's something that he's adamant on. That might be one example of an initiative that would be put in front of a national audience for dissection today. I guess we'll see if that lands with people.
Right, and then we have to adapt, and I think that we did adapt recently with respect to the initiative that the U.S. took with respect to electric cars, and the fear that they would only support electric cars if they were built in the United States, shutting out their NAFTA partners, Mexico and Canada. But because of efforts that were undertaken by our embassy in Washington, we were able to get them to take a different view of that. And now, certainly, the rules of origin for the production of electric cars are North American rules of origin. So Canada has been kept within that marketplace, which is very important for us.
Geoff, I can tell that people are not going to be satisfied with this interview. They need to hear more from you. They need to read your book. And of course, we'll have the link, how people can connect with your work in the show notes here on the podcast and the YouTube episodes here of the show. But are you going to be doing any speaking? I know that you're going to be in our home city of Edmonton a couple of days from now. Do you have any events coming up?
Well, yes, I do. I have an event tomorrow night or evening at the Calgary Public Library, the Memorial Park branch of the Calgary Public Library. I'll be speaking about my book. I'll be doing some readings from the book, and I will. Although the book is available for free, I would love it if people would actually buy copies, and I'll have some copies for sale at the library.
I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I just know. You know what? This is an audience. I guarantee it. Not only is this Canada's most engaged audience, and I will go to the wall to defend that claim. There is evidence everywhere of it, but it's also an audience that supports great journalism and that supports storytelling. And so I know that people will be happy to buy copies of your book. Is there a website or is there a resource you want to share with us where people can learn more about what you're doing in future speaking engagements?
I don't have a website, but one other speaking engagement, which you mentioned earlier, is I will be also doing a presentation at Audrey's Books in Edmonton.
Love it.
On Thursday night.
Okay, good stuff. People can contact Audrey's directly. We'll do some digging. We'll put it in the show notes. That's my favorite bookstore. It's an awesome bookstore right on Java. Have you been there before?
Oh, many times. Of course,
so
much of my career, early career was in Alberta, and I covered the Alberta legislature. I used to spend a lot of time browsing the aisles of Audrey's.
Yeah, we've got a family tradition when we go to Audrey's. Little Wyatt, he's 7. He goes straight downstairs to the kids section while mom and dad browse upstairs for a little while. Geoff White, I have no doubt we could speak for hours. Congratulations on the new book. It's no wonder people are so interested. It's an insightful take, but you also invoke a lot of humor and your candid commentary is much appreciated on your long and successful career as a Canadian diplomat. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today on Real Talk.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for contacting me.
Yeah,
Really
you got it. A shout out to Sheila Pratt, longtime journalist, who put Geoff's book on our radar. Real Talk, our presentation to you, our shows are made more strong. The show is more interesting when you're in touch with us, letting us know if there's a guest you'd like to hear on the show or something you'd like to talk about. Fascinating stuff there from Geoff White. You probably noticed, by the way, that I'm also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm wearing kind of a unique T-shirt today. And let me get my laptop out of the way here. This is the Rad Dad's shirt that I'm proud to rep. And I wanted to let you know it was a huge honor to be invited to sit on the other side of the microphone at a recent live recording of the Rad Dad's Show. It's a podcast. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast. Just search for the Rad Dad's Show. It's a show about being a dad, and it's a show that's heavy on the punk rock. They're typically interviewing like singers of punk bands.
Talking my language here.
Oh man, they're like asking me. I had just been listening. My cousin Carson had put Propagandi's song back on
Propaganda,
my
one
radar.
of my favorite bands since
One of the
I've
greatest
been 15 years
right?
old.
And we get to be proud of the
vegans.
Of course, from Winnipeg, right?
Big animal rights, big just.
We were talking about the. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
We were talking about that. They said, like, what's a song you've been listening to? What's a band you've been listening to? Love Propaganda. My cousin Carson put Dear Coach's Corner back on my radar.
How do I not know you love Propaganda?
Well, I love a lot of punk bands. I'll surprise you, buddy.
Like, we gotta
Someone
rock
say
out.
to me,
We
like,
gotta-
what do you listen to? I say, I don't know, man. What do you listen? Like, what do you want to listen to? Symphony, house, punk, country. I'll listen to it all. I'm kind of like a mishmash.
But for me, 90s SoCal, which is Southern California punk rock.
Yeah, sure.
Or mid to late 90s, which
Yeah.
is Propaganda, No Effects, No Use for a Name.
Yeah, I love Bad Religion, Pennywise. Yeah,
that
of
is
course.
my. I get in the car, I
Oh,
crank
buddy.
it, I roll the windows up. I
Are you going to
start
see?
screaming.
Are you going to see Blink 182? Somebody told me the tickets are like $400 to
So
go see
here's
Blink.
the thing. I was going to go see them, but Blink 182 holds, because all punk bands hold a special piece of my teenage years.
Okay.
But for my wife, Blink 182 is very special to her. Her friend got her tickets. They're going together. So I was like, you know what? This is one instance where I'm not going to like go buy my own tickets, go have a rad time, go post a bunch of I'm going to let her have this experience.
You can stay
for
at home
herself
with your fancy
I've
headphones.
seen Blink 182 like 6 times
Yeah.
from the age of like 14 to 18. So I'm good. And I'm just going to let her have this evening for herself, right?
We were driving in the car the other day, and I was driving in my Ram 1500 Longhorn the other day from St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge, and we were listening to some mellow tunes.
Yeah.
And we were on our way to piano lessons, taking Wyatt to piano lessons, and I always try to put some piano on. Just to like subtly, just to kind of, but I'll put different stuff on.
see what
Like
you
one
did
day
there.
it might be like Billy Joel, or one day it might be like, I don't know, like just some like chill, like it was
But
listening
you'll
to
slip in some Mozart.
slip in
and-
some piano.
Yeah.
Like I want him to sort of have that in the back of his mind. But he says to me the other day, "Can we listen to some rock?" And I said, "Sure." And so I put on what I thought was decent rock. It was like kind of a deep cut, like a 70s B-side. And he goes,
Yeah.
"No, like rock." He goes like guitars, and he kind of motioned like Eric. He goes like guitars, and so I put on Blink 182, and all of a sudden you just hear from the back seat, "Yeah!" And I was like, I got to be careful which song I put on for this kid. All right, so to bring this full circle, if you check out raddadyag.com or just look for the Rad Dad Show anywhere you get your podcasts, you can check out the episode that I did with them. It was recorded live in front of an audience, and we appreciate all the real talkers that showed up there. We had a packed house at Arcadia Brewing Company a few weeks ago, but that
Look at that
episode
mug.
is now live. You can hear me talk about some of the stuff that I don't talk about often on the show, most especially because they were asking me the questions.
Nice.
And so we talk a bit about parenting and the like. I'm going to get to an email about this by-election in Southern Alberta, Bricks Medicine Hat from Calum. I also wanted to circle back on our Chrystia Freeland comments yesterday. we had Duane Bratt and Charles
Some
Adler
feedback, yeah.
both chime in on her comment about Disney Plus, and some of you wrote in, and I appreciate those comments. What are you shaking your head at?
Just the fact that she thought Disney Plus was like just the Little Mermaid, like, you know, the classics. Like, she has no idea.
No, she didn't think that, but she was using Disney Plus as. Here's the thing. I'm going to let the comments speak for themselves. First,
it's just funny.
But first, every Tuesday, we focus on innovation. This is courtesy of our friends at Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Courtesy of our friends at Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Every Tuesday, we focus on a person or a group or an invention that's changing the game. Something that is a response to the world around us. Something that's making life better. It's called The Leading Edge. And in the spotlight today, this is an initiative from the Edmonton Pride Seniors Group, otherwise known as the EPSG. They're getting closer to the dream of building a queer-friendly retirement home. Yeah, that's right. The group is working with the city to acquire a piece of land where they can build an affordable housing development where queer seniors can feel comfortable and safe being themselves without worrying about whether residents or staff will accept them. This is an amazing group and an amazing initiative. They're looking to have a 50-unit mixed-income building, and that means that about 40% of the units would be available at 80% of market rental rates. Folks are saying that being LGBTQ2S+ is much more accepted now, sure, than when most of today's seniors were young, but that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be surrounded by staff and residents who accept them for who they are once they need the extra support that assisted living offers. Now, this is something that the average person might not think about, but many people in our community come from a long and painful history. And this is one of the critical reasons that a resource like this is so important for seniors. And there is significant demand already. You know, about 215 people responded to a survey on this project a couple of years ago. More than 60 said they'd be willing to move into the building as soon as it would be constructed. They said to be able to be celebrated as an open seniors community would be huge. And of course, being with friends, being with loved ones, being with partners is paramount. The design will have space for health care and home care without the risk of gay, lesbian, or queer seniors being pushed back into the closet. This initiative from the Edmonton Pride Seniors Group is meeting seniors where they're at, providing comfort and support as seniors age in a facility that brings them the resources they need. And that's why this initiative is in the spotlight of this week's edition of The Leading Edge, presented by Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Life shouldn't hurt. I love that story. That's such a great one. And that's something that when you talk about where society's at right now, or you talk about gains that have been made, we need to acknowledge that there has been a lot of heavy lifting from people that have worked for decades, that have advocated for decades to get us to where we are today.
It's great. I love it.
Fascinating stuff. I promised that I would get to Calum's email. If you're just tuning in live, you might be on the Mixlr live streaming audio app and you're just joining the show. We open talking about Election Day. It's voting day today. Our American neighbors in many states will be voting as part of the 2022 midterms. And of course, Albertans in Brooks, Medicine Hat, that provincial riding, will be showing up for the by-election. Will Premier Danielle Smith earn her seat in the legislature today? Or will Barry Morishita, the former mayor of Brooks, or will Gwendolyn Dirk, the NDP candidate, take that riding? Calum wrote in to talk at ryanjespersen.com, says, I just wanted to hop in on your comments about that by-election and potentially having the NDP step aside for the Alberta Party. I wondered if that might be a smart move or that might be a conciliatory move. And then I kind of laughed away the idea. But Calum says, listen, the reality is that only two parties are prepared to win government and no other party has broken through with Albertans. You know, the Alberta Party's polling at less than 6%. Donations are less than the pro-life movement. That is true last quarter. And he says in less than 2% of the NDP's donations. The Green Party has more candidates nominated than the Alberta Party. So in order to even consider this idea, I would need to know, how prepared is the Alberta Party to run a general election? Do they plan on running in every riding? If you ask Barry Morishita, he'll say yes, but I digress. Back to Calum's email. Do they have active CAs, constituency associations? How many members do they have? Can they even answer these questions right now? Also, how do we know that NDP voters would vote for the Alberta Party? In 2019, the Alberta Party platform was very close to the United Conservative Party's platform. So for the Alberta NDP, they're poised to win government based on nearly every metric, polling, donations, and the like. They need to have a candidate in every riding. To me, this question is like asking the United Conservatives if they'll step aside to let a pro-life candidate run in some ridings. Or would they step aside in Calgary ridings to let the Alberta Party win and stop the NDP? Who's to say that can even happen? Calum says, I want more parties and choices on the ballot. Reducing those choices does not help democracy, in my opinion. If the Alberta Party wants a seat, they should win the most votes legitimately, not with the help of other parties. That's a hell of an email from Calum, and I appreciate you taking the time to write in. You know what I love about that? Calum wrote that in at 8:56, which is like 6 minutes after we talked about it. That's a guy just free-flowing thought. And
that early in the morning? Props to him.
Yeah, props to Calum. I'd like to know what coffee he's drinking. All right. We also wanted to touch on a conversation that we had yesterday about Chrystia Freeland's Disney Plus comments. Am I putting you on the spot if I ask for the clip? Are we able to? Can we call up the clip on short notice?
Ryan,
this is Canada's Deputy Prime Minister. This is Canada's Finance Minister. I didn't ask you for it, so if we don't have it in the docket, it's no big deal. But Chrystia Freeland basically said, she was talking about inflation, and she was talking about cost and pressures and stress. And really, to be fair, she was talking about the federal government's approach to it. And I'm only playing a clip here. I'm trying to be fair in how we present this, but she made a comment about her family and a Disney Plus streaming subscription. How much advertising is Disney Plus getting? I mean, how many times have we said it here on the show in the last 2 days? How many times? It was trending across the country. Mm-hmm. Anyway, before we get to the fallout, before we get to what you told us about this and what people are saying online, here it is for context.
And I think Canadian families are looking really closely at all of their expenses. I personally, as a mother and wife, look carefully at my credit card bill once a month. And last Sunday, I said to the kids, you're older now, you don't want to watch Disney anymore. Let's cut that Disney Plus subscription. So we cut it. It's only $13.99 a month that we're saving, but every little bit helps. And I think every mother in Canada is doing that right now.
So people are asking, is this the Deputy Prime Minister's Marie Antoinette moment, right? Is this let them eat cake? Is this someone who earns close to $300,000 a year and has a staff and privilege, basically missing the mark when it comes to understanding the impact of inflation on the average Canadian family? People have been quite critical of Chrystia Freeland on this. And we heard from some of you. What about this, though, from Andrew Coyne, probably the preeminent political commentator in Canada. Love that he was on Real Talk a little while ago. He says, I've had a lot of issues with Chrystia Freeland's budgets, but this Disney Plus thing is the absolute fakest controversy imaginable. He calls it a fake controversy. He goes on to say, basically, this is not what we were talking about. Andrew Coyne says, basically, it's being blown out of proportion. So there you have it from Andrew Coyne. And what about this? Another tweet from Steve Inyeg, who says, Jespo, he says, I don't buy it, right? Steve Inyeg says the Freeland quote requires a bit more discussion. She continues on to say that she takes that philosophy to the finance ministry by looking for ways to save money. She goes on to say that they set a goal of saving a few billion and then exceeded that. It's more than one clip. And then we got an email here. I appreciated this from Rick. Rick said, Ryan, I see where Minister Freeland's getting dumped on from great heights. You don't usually hear that one. I like that. Dumped on from great heights.
I don't like the wording.
Yeah. Do you have kind of like a visual in your mind that
Let's move on.
You want to move on? Okay. For her comment regarding her family dropping the Disney Channel, Rick says critics range from you and come on, me, Charles Adler, to numerous online broad foreheads. We got to get Rick to write our promos. Jeez. He says, to even the strategists, for God's sake. You know them. They were on our Real Talk Roundtable a few weeks ago. Rick says, everybody seems to think that coming from a wealthy member of the Laurentian elite, her remark could only be construed as coming out of the mouth of a latter-day Marie Antoinette, a flagrant insult hurled into the faces of downtrodden Canadians. My take, when I first heard what she said, was that in her heart and her mind, she's still a farm girl from Fairview, Alberta. My bet is that she really did discuss with her kids what are unnecessary costs and that she really did cancel the Disney Channel. I would further bet that a comms person didn't need to write her lines for her. But I'm an old man now, says Rick, thankful that I lost my cynicism as I aged. It's one of my favorite emails in a long time. Calum and Rick just nailing it today. Would you agree?
The wordings. Broadhead.
The broad foreheads online. And I requested permission to read this one with you because we got a note from a former Alberta minister. She's now in opposition. She's a popular politician out of Lethbridge, Alberta. She wants to be a minister again, I guarantee you that. Shannon Phillips, who's a great communicator in her own right. She said, this is easy. She sent this to us directly. I said, can I share this with Real Talkers? She said, yeah, sure. She actually is keeping it classy. She took out a few partisan swipes. She said you can read the full thing except for that last little bit, which unfortunately is the best part, but we'll keep it classy. She says, this is easy, Chrystia. You don't talk about yourself. Nobody wants any kind of life advice from a politician. Here's what you say. Last week, I talked to a grandmother on her doorstep that had to move in with her adult son and his wife because her rent went up. And she's looking for a second job so the whole family can pay the bills. I met another family who literally hugged me when I told them about the dental thing. They're working class folks with another baby on the way, and they don't have benefits. Shannon says, literally both of these examples are my real constituents. These are real examples. The problem here is that Chrystia Freeland hasn't spoken to any normal people. Anytime a politician makes the issue about their job or their life rather than about a voter's job or a voter's life, you're doing it wrong. And you need to go back to political school. That from Shannon Phillips, an Alberta MLA out of Lethbridge. I appreciate knowing that the elected representatives are listening to this show as well.
Yeah. I didn't know there was a political school. I should enroll.
What would they teach at political school? I don't even know. I mean, you'd have to sort of talk about like which party were you looking to get elected to, because the school and the curriculum would probably greatly differ. You know what I mean?
How to be a neocon.
Yeah. Sapri and I talked about this last week on Seriously. If you haven't yet subscribed to seriouslypod.com, please do so. It's a project that we're really proud of. John produces it. Big surprise. A half an hour or less every Wednesday, we bring you boiled down, noise-free. We cut through the noise. Insight, real life, John and Jill Q Public insight on national news stories and political stories in the federal landscape. And Sapria talked about this.
Always a good thing.
I mean, bonus Sapria is always a good thing. And she talked about that. She talked about kind of the thinking behind, some of the politics and the political school, like what the, what the curriculum might look like. And she wondered if sometimes the mandates for a lot of these elected representatives are simply just to be pricks. And it was a really great conversation, and I encourage you to check it out. That was last week, Seriously. And, of course, we got one coming up again tomorrow. We keep an eye on our hashtag, RealTalkRJ, and as you know, it's powered by our friends at Park Power. They wanted me to let you know, of course, winter's here, if you hadn't noticed. How was your drive in today?
You don't want to know.
Took about 90 minutes.
So I come from the south side. It's about a 25-minute drive in the summer. Now it's getting to like 40, 45 plus accidents are starting. So
the good news is you can listen to the Real Talk podcast on your way in, John. Isn't that exciting?
I'm like, oh.
Park Power, of course, cold and dark times means higher energy usage in the homes of Albertans, so it's a great time to shop around for utilities providers. If you're on the regulated rate or the variable rate for electricity, you're paying more for electricity than you have to. That's a fact. Park Power's current fixed electricity rate plans are almost half the cost of the regulated rate option. Half the cost. Customers don't have to fear being locked into a contract when you choose their fixed rate plan. You can switch rates or you can cancel anytime for free. That's how confident they are that this is a good play for you. You can go to parkpower.ca today to compare rates on electricity, natural gas, and internet. And don't forget the promo code 2022-RealTalk will knock $70 off your first bill. You can contact them on the website if you have any issues whatsoever. I mentioned that Dodge Ram, the 1500 Longhorn that I've been driving. My deal's coming up on that. I don't know what I'm going to get into next. This whole pickup thing, this pickup life has been
I'm excited to see what a guy like you who owned like a Jeep, kind of Jeep style
I've bounced around. I've had I've been, but this Ram, it was the
changed
first.
You.
It's just like, it's very convenient.
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. It's also inconvenient parallel parking, but I digress. It's got all the cameras. It it almost parks itself. I mean, not actually, but virtually parks itself. It's a beautiful truck, and of course, I got that one at St. Albert Dodge. Their sister dealership, Sherwood Dodge, the two of them working together ensures that you're going to find the perfect fit, whatever it is you're looking for. You want one of those tiny, as my grandpa used to call them, the four-bangers? You want something more fuel efficient? Or you want the big Hemi to pull that holiday trailer? You'll find your perfect fit today at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. You can shop them online from the convenience of your own home. Speaking of your own home, through this spring and summer, did you find yourself almost resenting your front or backyard? Taking a look at how lousy it is, to be honest. Like it's bland and plain, lacks motivation, lacks functionality. Your friends are talking about having a barbecue, and you just figure you should go to their place, not yours, because, well, you don't want people seeing the state of your outdoor space. Enter Eden Landscaping, my friends, at landscapeedmonton.ca. They bring outdoor spaces to life, and if you want shovels in the ground in spring, have last summer be the final summer of a lousy outdoor space, today's a great day to look them up and start talking about that design process. Get it underway through the winter so the crews are there first thing in the spring. You can find Mike and his team. Make contact. Check out their portfolio at landscapeedmonton.ca. And John, what are we talking about today when it comes to the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park? Ooh, it's the new caramel macchiato.
With another top shelf, I would say mature chocolate bar in there, the Coffee Crisp.
Yeah, you don't see like a lot of 4-year-olds eating Coffee Crisp, do you?
No.
I can crush like 6 Coffee Crisp in a row. No problem. I'm not going to do it. I'm just saying I could. That sounds like a fabulous treat from the Dairy Queens in Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. We're talking Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. Baseline Road just with a big, big facelift. They've done a beautiful job there. You know that's a top 5 Dairy Queen in Canada?
Wow.
Folks in Sherwood Park love their Dairy Queen. The signature stack burgers as well there. We're going to recommend the Flamethrower stack burger today. Throw a little spice into your Tuesday at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Hey, this has been a fun show. We've covered a lot of ground. We appreciate your feedback. The more engaged you are, the more we bring to the table. So smash like, hit subscribe, share these episodes. Make sure that people that give a rip know that we're talking about subjects that matter every weekday right here on Real Talk. You can check out our Patreon at ryanjespersen.com. And I want to let you know, coming up on tomorrow's show, she's going to be joining us from Egypt. That's right. She's at COP27. We're going to be talking to Zipporah Berman. And then our Remembrance Day Roundtable coming up on Friday, presented by Urban Timber. Make it a great day, Real Talkers.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.